Lula XYZ, or Z, depending on who you are. And I'm a Glover, so just so I don't bore anyone with any details that they already know. Are we familiar to what these are, what they do? One or two? Okay, so they are the brainchild of Imogen Heap and a team of amazing 10 people from all over the world, from NASA scientist Kelly to coding genius Adam, and then some. They're a MIDI controller, so a remote control, like the one you have for your TV and everything else, but in the form of a glove. They have flex sensors, buzzers inside, as well as lights, LED lights in the corners, which I use. Most of the people who have the gloves, which I think is about 25 of us at the moment, are predominantly musicians or researchers. I think 5 of us are working musicians. That's how I started, like the rest of them. But I want to take you on a real case story, and you'll see my notes, and I take no shame, because you know what, this is supposed to be today, right? I promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me the universe and the gloves. Hopefully they work today. So this is my keynote presentation. This is the first time I've attempted to do gloves using keynote using the gloves. As of last week, I said, Adam, could I please control visuals specifically for presentation with gloves? It seemed a bit ridiculous that I'm doing these talks about amazing things that these gloves can control, but I didn't have I had to have an extra button and remember to turn off my gloves so that I don't trigger sounds when I'm trying to do something else, because these are in essence a weapon in themselves, depending on how you map them out. So here goes the experiment. I will turn them on. Hopefully they work. Yes. We have battery. You can see on the, not battery, Wi-Fi connection. There you go. So both of my gloves are technically working. And I would test them by just, okay. So that's essentially an example. At the moment, I'm playing Ableton, this track in particular. Let us do the, what's it called? The keynote test. Nope, that's not where you are. Okay. So what I'm doing here is changing between the scenes. If you think of it as a book, a chapter, each chapter has sections in your book, right? If you think of a laptop or a website, you have tabs, and that tab takes you to a different page. So by doing this, I'm going to the song, the mappings that let me access Ableton, and that lets me facilitate singing a particular song. Here lives my looper for when I want to. 1, 2, 3, 4, tell me that he loved me more. 1, 2, 3, 4, tell me that he loved me. Okay. And then I would have to check, did I map something wrong, or is the looper not on? Where are you, Lupa?
1, 2, 3, 4, tell me that he loved me more. 1, 2, 3, 4, tell.
Okay. So, English. So at the moment, for the current project I have one instrument mapped out, keys, the ones that you just heard. I have a looper, an Ableton looper, mapped out, just basic things. I use the LED lights to give me a sense of where I am in Glover. In Glover. So the scenes, Dorsten, the notes with the keys is in purple. When I'm in looper, I'm in blue. When I'm recording the looper, it's in red.
Tell me that he loved me.
What else do I need to tell you? So so it's up to you how you use the gloves, but it took maybe 3.5 years, which is today, to have a system for myself, like outside of having cool LED lights, like what can you do on stage? How can they serve me or the audience? Mostly the lights serve me. The audience just see random lights. For me, it means that I don't have to look at my laptop to know where I am in the laptop. But you work out a system, and then perhaps after a lot of trial and errors, you work out what you can always do. So as a default, blue means my gloves are safe. There's no accidental sounds I'm going to trigger. Record I tend to have up here because I'm less likely to record if my hands are here and they're talking. And there's two buttons, one on the left and one on the right. So the gloves have a gyroscope, which they let me work on X and Y and Z direction. I'm sure most of you know what that is more than I. So I can accidentally, even when my hands aren't moving, accidentally trigger something. And then Keynote, which is today's experiment, is here. However, I haven't set the color to Keynote because, like I said, it was born the other day. Visuals used to live here. So how I change the scenes, I tend to use both left and right hands, what we call postures. So at the top, as you can see, I've got a fist, left up, and first finger forward. So if you think of this is my first, second, third, fourth. So at the moment I've said I'd do something like this. Is it supposed to flick? Did it? Oh. Okay, so the reason Keynote's probably not going to work right now is because Adam said that Keynote needs to be in play mode. Let's see if we can activate and operate it both ways. No. So what should have happened is when I did that posture, it should have just gone to the next slide. Why did I bother with the gloves? Well, I think I'm less of a musician, but more like a creative gypsy. I think there was a writer who said she considers herself to be a vessel for expression. Her job is not to self-masturbate when she writes a masterpiece or thinks she's amazing because she has one success with one book. Because sometimes, the fear of your next book is really scary. And so she always said, she's just a vessel. Her job is to always have a pen. And these creative geniuses would go into her body and she'd just make sure she writes. And so pretty much, this is my pen, my tool. My paintbrush is perhaps this is the paintbrush, the gloves. And then the paint and the colors is probably my voice and my creative expression. That way of creating has made me force myself to create a box for myself, because as a creative, you tend to, for me, I found that trying to fit into other people's definitions of what specific things is, like a singer, and be like, okay, a singer is Mariah Carey, who can do riffs, or Ella Fitzgerald, who can jam next to Louis Armstrong, and all these things. If the idea of these things I found crippling, and then sometimes if you go to write a song, depending on what format you're writing for, it closes you off. However, if you create a box by yourself, then you can go to write a song, and that song could end up being a 10-page story, and that's fine. And a tool like this means that I can have that kind of freedom depending on how I use it. At the beginning, as a solo musician, just so you know why I'm technically retarded, if that's a bad word, sorry. I refer to myself as a digital immigrant, just like my mother, who, when she came here and she didn't know English and she made faux pas and said Daliston instead of Dalston, trying to get to Dalston, or Shepherdbush instead of Shepherd's Bush, and nobody understood what she said. And I'm sure she said some ignorant stuff, accidentally meaning something else. I find myself doing the same thing with the land of tech. So I appreciate your patience. Let's go to here. These are my parents. Dad. Mum's in there somewhere. So that's my parents. And so that's my lineage. Only this year did I teach my mother how to use Skype on my laptop. In fact, I realized she's never even been on a computer before. She's never even touched a touchpad. So up until now, I'd just put in the numbers and call it for her, and she'd use it. And recently, she's asked, could one of us get her an iPhone or something so that she could have WhatsApp. I'm like, wow, cool, here's an iPad. But then I realized she doesn't know how to use it. And so I liken my experience with these to hers, when like what she's going through right now, or when she first came into this country, trying to navigate having to speak or learning where her children should go to school, or all the things you have to learn to do when you first come to a new land or language or world. So no, I'm very much not a techie person. I'm a digital immigrant. And whilst it's taken me 4 years with these, well, 3.5, with these to have worked out that there are a couple of systems. I'm working across 3 platforms: music as a solo artist and in a band setting, theater, and dance. And the experience in using these gloves in those 3 settings has been insightful, to say the least. As a solo artist, I've learned that when you're using something cool past the aesthetics of, oh wow, she's controlling that all live, how does doing that serve the audience? When you can have the music in your hands for a certain song, you're triggering samples or you're playing loops. So I learned that it's probably a good idea to try and use this as an instrument. So we spoke about postures. I worked out these are the best postures for me: open hand, fist, first, second, third, fourth. And I do the same with all 3. Then there's the peace sign and the rabbit. The reason I've chosen these is because they gave me creative, I could always hit this posture, I guess. And if you think of postures as, does anyone play guitars here? Or keys or something? Like when you first learn to play the guitar, you learn shapes, right? The A shape, the D shape, the E shape. So in essence, I think of using the glove in the same way. I always make sure that a stop is a fist, a right hand fist in the air. Play is open hand and like a wave. Because then that way, I'm not stuck to just playing a song. It means I can play with other people too. And it gives me creative space. Like if I want to create a song on the fly, then I can just be like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 8. Do you want a demonstration? Yes. You might want to turn this mic off for a second. Okay. Well, so this was, hello? Can you hear me? Yeah. So this was the first song I decided to write. Well, the song was half born before Gloveland. The lyrics were. But the music instrumentation was born with gloves in mind. And I just like the aesthetics of like a style of dance called tutting, which is like a finger dance. I smile, you laugh, I sneeze, you cough, I jump, you fly, or what away. And then it does those random anomalies. To live a life of sunny days, I heard the weather got in your way. But when the gods cry, flowers bloom, birds rise, giving birth to a new sky. Walking down the meadows of Doston, I see a red bumblebee, a big hippopotamus coming for me. Ah, butterflies come to rescue this dandelion caught in curfew. 'Cause I sneeze, you cough, I jump, you fly, what away. To live a life of sunny days, I heard the weather got in your way. But when the gods cry, 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 you can see what I'm doing, right? Flowers bloom, birds fly, giving birth to a new sky. So then this is when I do vocal effects. Rabbit. Sky, da 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 da. New sky. So for things like, hello? Okay. Things you might want to look out at is on the screen to my right. You have the different scenes, right? So when I was, right now on the top, the red button is on, so it means I've muted the glove and I'm not accidentally triggering anything. So always, what I need to always be consistent is the ability to turn off the gloves and then the ability to set north, because remember it has X, Y, and Z axis, so I need those to always be consistent, not to be trippy or anything like that. And then, there we go, and then my setting north. And then here, there are certain things, irrespective of what scene I'm in, I need it to always be able to access it, like vocal effects, depending on, irrespective of whether I'm in the looper or something else, I need to be able to make my voice do some extra stuff. Am I on? Make my voice do extra stuff. And then make it stop. Why is this stuff important? Like I said, to be able to have the freedom, when you meet a guitarist and he's like, all right, let's jam. If I just have the cute song, then I'm stuck. And we can't go any direction other than the song I've pre-created. But if I give myself access to like effects units or different things, then it means that I can meet somebody or a looper, then I can jam with them and we can just play live. It's taken a few years, just like any instrument, for you to work out how to play it, but what's been a journey with these gloves is there's no rules, and to make decisions about always having a stop here and what works for you. Like an A on a guitar, on any guitar, is always the same. When you, like, whoever teaches you the guitar, someone a long time ago established this is how you do these things. But if someone gives you access to a virtual room and says you can put the drums anywhere in the room, and in fact, every time you come into a house and you have a different visitor, you can move the kit everywhere. How do you remember any of that? It's kind of difficult, and you learn that there's certain things that perhaps you must always have rooted somewhere. Start and stop, whether it's a sample or a looper or anything. Visuals, you might just want to always have the same posture that helps you do that. But that only works when you're working as a solo artist or a band member in music. Now, I explored MiMu gloves with dancers. Now, those rules can't apply if the routine goes, if it does something else, but your stop is up here. That doesn't work. So then you have to forgo like the rules that you have for you as a solo entity and let the dance dictate what the movements need to be, what the postures need to be, even to the point of like all this. As you can see, every time I'm moving, it would have been triggering, but as you can see, it's stopped, so it's not triggering anything, right? To the point where even your postures have to change, because in your dance routine, this doesn't exist. Your hand has to be this. So the level of mind mapping that you have to do on levels I didn't even know was possible is ridiculous. These are the amazing dancers, House of Absolute, who have been crazy enough to experiment with me in gloves, because all we do is we get in a space and we play around and we dance. And so I needed to be able to make sure that I gave myself the same kind of freedom with the gloves and not mess up their routine when we're dancing because, I triggered a wrong sound. And where it's really important as a solo artist and a musician to make the things that you're doing visually engaging to the audience and interesting, in dance, I've learned that maybe it's not as important that the tech is controlling all the sound. Just using the tech to give you the power to, to control what you need when you need it. Like you need the music to be triggered exactly at this point, then you can. And being able to do vocals and dance with them has been really amazing. And then for those kind of things, I tend to use what's described as global gestures, where I tend to use like the X, Y, Z postures, whereas for the solo stuff, doing a song like this for a whole hour, if this is where the chords live, is really boring. Like, I don't know about you, but for me, after the first, I just can't. It's very unexpressive. But for dance, that can make sense. You can have like a beat here, like, and then you can do the same thing. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm popping the mic. The videographer's gonna hate me. But this is the reality of what it means to be working in dance. That would happen because no one else is mic'd. And so as a dancer, you're having to remember the routine, remember everything you need to be, but then also remember you're singing, which is fine, the voice is inside your throat, and then you have to remember not to trigger anything by accident. So the mute button has been my best friend on the gloves. Just the ability to tell it, like, shut up for a minute, like, let me concentrate, and it's always been legit. It's not accidentally getting triggered. And there's no better way to do that than a button, because it's guaranteed I don't have to know these things, right? So I thought dance was a challenge. And then I discovered theater. I was in a production last year, well, it started 2 years ago, called Rufus Longbottom and the Space Rabbit, in which, as you can you see the resemblance? The little illustration was designed with me in mind, the hair and the gloves. And within the context of that, we had to justify having the gloves. Like, how does it serve the story? What's its point? Other than it being able to do, like, what we needed it to do. So we decided that Space Rabbit came from outer space, and a meteorite hit her land, and all her people scattered, and she landed on Earth. And she meets a gentleman called Rufus Longbottom, who's an old man in a wheelchair, and he goes on a mission. He decides to help her look for her people on her land. Now, her superpower is sound, and how she acquires, space rabbit language is not English. It's actually, we decided it was meep shmeep. But how she's able to speak and acquire language is when she first meets Rufus, which happens in the first scene, the second scene, because the meteorite happens before then. He speaks to her, she captures it, and it's my friend, the looper. She captures it, and then so I just cleared, so this always helps. I cleared what the previous loop was, so I'm not accidentally going to trigger anything, right? So I think he used to say, my name is Rufus Longbottom. Can you not hear? Let's delete that. Let's try that again, and then it goes red. Rufus Longbottom. Ah, okay.
Longbottom.
There it is.
Rufus Longbottom.
And so with that,
Rufus Longbottom.
everyone bugged out because it's like, how did she record it? So I had to learn how to have him mic'd and me mic'd and be able to switch between, have the mappings of this very different, have two scenes, and being able to turn on his mic and turn off my mic at different times. And then once we had that, then my reverse is this. Then she realizes she's played it backward and that doesn't make sense, right? So she'd reverse it back.
Rufus Longbottom.
And then Rufus Longbottom. Rufus
Bottom.
Bottom.
Rufus Longbottom. Rufus Longbottom.
Huh. Rufus Longbottom. That's essentially how she first learned how to speak English. And so the gloves made sense from the beginning. The audience were able to understand, oh, that's how she's doing it, because they can physically see what she's doing. It's less small movements, more global movements, so that they could see the movements and the musicality of it. And so even when she meets a wolf later, of course, there's always a wolf who tries to eat the rabbit. And when she met the wolf, up until that point, she had been collecting these different sounds, which we recorded as samples. And so with the wolf, when he tries to devour her, what we decided was the best thing to do is she's bigger than herself because she has collected all these sounds. So all of a sudden, she became a ninja. And like with just movement like this, like she was able to trigger like an elephant sound or the bat sound that he heard earlier on, or the howling wolves, but make it sound more scary. Or even her voice, which was at the time when she was able to put it through effects. And he initially heard her do that and he laughed. And then, of course, I did a whole heap of that, which technically was just a rabbit, hand up, let it go, and then finish it. And she roared at him. Her voice was tenfold more, like you heard with the ping pong. And then I think we added like a detuner, so it was even like scarier. And so I remember seeing the kids freaking out in the audience, but they were excited because all of a sudden this meek rabbit became bigger than life and was able to fight the wolf, and everyone was rooting for her. This, like I said, gloving in theater was probably like the biggest challenge to date, because it's one thing to have the brain space to map, to do this. Like that first song that you saw requires 3 scenes. Each note is on a different hand, and it's the choreography between when this hand is bent, this hand is open, when this hand is da-da-da-da-da, right? To do that, remember it, and know that you've done that posture for something else, that you can't do it in that scene, like all these things, and then making these scenes exclusive so that it doesn't trigger something else in another scene. To have the brain power to do that for like a solo for one song is one thing. To have that within a production where you're working with other people and you're controlling other people's microphones, and you might accidentally record somebody at the wrong scene at the wrong time, it's been a lesson and a half. But with every obstacle, because what I've learned, the best thing to do is, instead of having like clean things, set things that you do with gloves, you want to give yourself as much freedom with the gloves. So if you do find yourself in an accident black hole triggering a sound by accident, then your ability to tell stories, or for it to have a narrative reason to why you use this at all, means that you can always get yourself out of the accident. You never break down the mysticism of what it is. And so you realize, like the X-Men, you too are an X-Men, and when you first discovered your power, you needed to learn how to harness it. And I suppose I've done 3.5 years of trying to do that. Doing a production like Rufus Longbottom and the Space Rabbit meant that because we were running on a production, I think it was like the day of the last technical rehearsal that everything came together. Because bear in mind, if I'm singing as a soloist, I still have my laptop and I can secretly look at it. When in a theater and I'm Space Rabbit, there is no laptop on stage. I need to be able to do something or prepare to do something and know that the glove's gonna work, guaranteed. And what's been really helpful for me, especially during those times, I think they helped me the most to help make decisions about the lights. How do they serve me? It's got the buzzer sensors inside. What do they tell me? What are the specific instructions that they give me? When I set north, so that X and Y and Z are always right, both gloves buzz. And so I know both of them have been set. When I mute the gloves, nothing happens, but I can press north to make sure if I press north and nothing buzzes, then I know my gloves are not gonna accidentally trigger anything. You know what I mean? So it's this extra brain power, processing power that's having to happen at the same time as like being on stage and just singing or just acting or just dancing. Yeah, and there's been accidental sounds many a times, but a production like Rufus Longbottom meant that because it was running for a period of time, or I'd go to trigger something and something doesn't trigger, and I can't look at my laptop, so what do I do in those moments? And in a theater production, in a song, I can style it, it's solo. In a theater production where it's essential for your character to make an elephant sound so that the wolf can jump at you and eat you, what do? You blag it. You make sure there's a sound guy who can potentially have a backup computer where he can see in your face that something's gone wrong and he knows to press the elephant sound. Or you go to your looper and make up an elephant sound in real time. So it's the ability to think on your feet. When technology fails you, how can you use technology to have creative solutions for whatever was supposed to happen? So yeah, like I said, at the beginning, the gloves let me do sound. And like most other people, I did. And now I'm using the gloves in relation to theater, dance, and now we're going a step further to look at how we can move inanimate, I can't pronounce that word. What's that word? Inanimate. That's the one. Thank you. Immigrant is fine. Inanimate. Say that again. Inanimate. My word for the week. Inanimate objects, like mini aeroplanes. What do you call them? Drones. So that's what we're working on at the moment. Moving inanimate objects, but with a purpose, like to serve story. Nina Simone said it best. As a creative, as an artist, your objective is to reflect the times. And for me, the biggest things going on right now is that there's Brexit potentially and all this other thing. And whilst I can't save any of us in real time, then maybe I can take our imaginations out of real-time Earth. And then, they're trying to do Mars. Can we just travel to Mars? They did it with Star Trek. Why can't we do it in real time? And why can't we hack these and other things and pair them up to do some fantastical, creative stories? Not for the purpose of, ooh, I'm wearing cool gloves, because that, past the first song, like I said, it gets boring. It has to have a purpose. And so whilst I'm pairing them up with other technologies, like hard objects. It's only like about a week ago I've been able to add visuals and control visuals in the way that I do sound, although I haven't been able to demonstrate it for you today because it's just one laptop and we had as much technical difficulties in the morning. And you were very patient. I don't know how long it would take before we'd be able to resolve it. And like I said, you were a fly on the wall to an experience that would always happen before every gig. Trust, there are times when seconds before the gig, the gloves didn't power up immediately. Amy in the audience will remember my first gig was TEDx at the O2 Arena, and everything worked perfect at soundcheck, perfectly. But then it was live streamed, and we didn't test the live streaming, like what channel they were in. And so as soon as the cameras were on and I was about to go on stage, I had less than 5 minutes. And it should have been as simple as like, power, gloves, great, and check. All the fingers work. And that's literally all I would do. I would make sure each posture does what it's supposed to, and then I'm good, right? But one glove powered on and the other one didn't. So what do I do? If I'm lucky enough, I had an Amy on the day. Amy, come, I can't think about this right now. She ran, she checked the channels and moved the channel of the gloves and the router. These work with a router and a computer, and this is the simplest setup to date. But like I said, the setup is getting more, and not for the purpose of just more, but for the purpose of making stories and ideas more fantastical and imagination going further than what it can. And challenging the technology. When someone says this has the facility to control anything, it's like, okay, let's test it out. And what's its limits? And then what do I do with those limits? Do I use them to cripple me, or do I use them to have creative solutions and force a creative story or approach to telling art. And I think as a result, I'm probably the only one. I think everyone does global gestures more. I ended up exploring tutting because I think visually that's more interesting. The problem with that is I only have 9 postures. So, it's a constant conversation with Adam of, Adam, I need more than 9. 9, you're guaranteed when you do a rabbit, then it'll be a rabbit. Okay, well then, can we have a switch, which means we can move to different 9 postures. So then it makes me more expressive, because equally, that's really interesting for that one song. But if every song was like this, God, I'm bored of myself already. I don't know about you as an audience. So that's the full plethora of me and Gloves to date. I hope that it's in a different space further next year. And I hope to see some of you guys in the audience somewhere. Does anyone have any questions? Thank you.
Hi, thank you for your talk. What was the hardest things to learn using the MiMu Glover? I mean, there were a series of challenges, but what were the most hard?
The hardest? So my background is vocals. Just to give you an insight, I didn't produce. I knew I liked certain things, so everything feels like a steep learning curve. I definitely don't code, and even working with coders, the language thing is a thing, and even understanding how to communicate. So just to help answer that a little bit better, actually, a couple of weeks ago, over a month ago, my gloves got stolen. Well, my whole suitcase got stolen, hence to why, sorry sound guy, there was, I'm still building up my assets, hard assets, but laptop, sound card, everything, gloves got nicked, and I was there for a gig. Now, blessings unto the universe, there was a Kelly Snook, the NASA chick, who was the originator of the, helping to create the gloves. She was there, and she was so, open and I have my gloves. How can I help you? You can borrow them. Thank God her hands are bigger than mine, so it was no drama, because I don't generally give anyone my gloves either, unless you're a baby and your hands are smaller than mine. But even that meant that I can't just like a guitar pick up and play the A chord and the C chord or whatever. One, I have to remember how I mapped out Dalston. So rules like stop, always being a fist up, or specific things, they really helped me. But remembering how to do that, I had to remember it like a choreography and learning how to recreate it. And then thank God that my approach has been to free myself from being stuck. That's probably about the only song that's dependent on the choreography. The looper is just play, stop, record. It's just an instrument that means I can record anything live to it and just play around with the knobs. They don't have to be specific things. And because I've set them in my head, they're always consistent. Those things really helped me, but anything else I made up was a struggle. But yeah, and even putting the gloves back together. So thank God I was able to be in the room to help make these in a day, and even being able to solder the parts. Before, I was so scared to damage them. So I was like, no one has them, I can't replace them, they were made by da 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 da. And it's true, but once you've lost them and you're recreating them, then it's less scary. And even understanding now, I have more knowledge since losing them, because I was part of the making of them. If both my gloves, so this is what I discovered, Amy. If one of the gloves don't power up, then I can put it on Bluetooth mode. And it doesn't have to use a router, but both hands can't be on Bluetooth mode. So having this knowledge helps on every level. But when you come from none of that knowledge, I can't tell you what's the biggest struggle, because right now, I've climbed those hurdles. So every hurdle is just a bit oh. But yeah, when you have no option, then you just work it out. Does it help to answer the question?
Yeah.
So everything. Yeah. Anything else?
there is no other questions, I would like to ask something else.
Okay.
How did you end up with MiMu gloves? I mean, did you have previous experiencing with other gesture controllers, or you just went straight to the MiMu gloves, and if yes, why?
Okay, so when I was studying, we had a class which was about, it was a musical theatre course, had no intentions of being in a musical. There was one class that was about musical theatre. Everything else was dance, drama, acting, like singing classes, right? But there was one class that was dedicated to your creative expression, your artistry. And so they'd invite different teachers, like different people from the industry to come, and you'd work on a song yourself, whichever one you picked, whether you wrote it or whatever, and then you'd present it. As a kid, I always wanted to play an instrument. Violin was like the instrument that was given to me, and I broke a string, and my sister scared me and told me, oh my God, if you break it, then Mum's gonna have to pay thousands of pounds. So when I broke a string, I thought I broke the violin, and I hid the violin back in the cupboard and told my teacher I didn't want to play. It's traumatized me till this day. So since I've always had this hunger to play, but even as an adult now, I don't know, I own 5 guitars. I had a piano in my bedroom for years, but I haven't quite learned how to have this level of pain and still go past the hurdle, whereas with technology, I have. And I don't know if it's because I spent everything I own on it, so I better work it out now. But in that class, when we were presenting songs, I've always just thought about how can you present things in an interesting way. Like when you close your eyes, does what that person is doing still move you? And when you open your eyes, what are you looking at? Like it's equally, forget the gloves, an full hour of a Mariah Carey song like this is like, I'm done. And I'm not about to booty bounce on stage, it's just not my flavor. But so in those classes, I discovered apps on the phone. And I think the first thing I played was a corona. You blow it and it makes a sound. And it's got little like fingers or something. It was like a recorder, but not. And I discovered that. It was the best discovery ever, and I discovered all these different apps. So that was the first thing I did. And then I found plants and like little crocodile clips and makey things. So I just thought, oh, the most visually interesting ways of performing. So I had a plant, and then I had the makey thing, so I'd touch the leaf and sing. So that's where I started. And then from there, I did just dive into a glove. Literally. And so
you didn't play like Kinect, click motion, or that kind of stuff?
no, I discovered all that stuff through gloves.
Okay.
Me wanting to expand the use for like how can I do visuals or do more things with the gloves led me to the discovery of all that stuff. So I literally, someone threw me in the middle of the ocean and said, swim. And then I found a shark and a slimy thing and other things along the journey. But yeah, so that's what it was.
All right, everyone, please join me in thanking Lula again.
Thank you very much.